Thank you for stopping by the Bluegrass podcast. Today we've got an extra incredible guest, New York Times bestselling author Brian Box Brown of the graphic novel Cannabis, The Illegalization of Weed in America, as well as the weekly comic strip Legalization Nation, which details bad practices by big MSOs in the cannabis industry. We are so excited to have him on, as well as another musical feature of Zach Bryan with his song Dissatisfied. We hope you'll yodel along with us today, but before we get started, if you haven't, consider hitting that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes, or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. If you like our interviews, advocacy work, and other projects, consider donating even $1 a month to our Patreon, or buying some merch from the store to help us keep the mic on, gas in the tank, and Kentucky cannabis clean. All links are in the episode description as well as on our website, bluegrasscannabis.com. Welcome again to the Bluegrass Podcast, and let's get started. Hi, Brian. How are you doing?
Hey, what's happening?
How are you doing this morning?
Oh, not too bad. Pretty tired. My son got up really early this morning. So I'm drinking an energy drink at 9 a.m. right now.
So, I guess I'll ask, what came first, comics or cannabis?
Oh, that's funny. I mean, comics, because I was like 5 or something when I started reading comics. Um, but yeah, and I got into cannabis when I was like a teenager. Um, I started making comics seriously, like semi-seriously anyway, when I was like 25. And before that, I never really, I didn't draw like at all. I like liked to draw, but I would never like pursue it seriously, and kind of like avoided the art in a way. Um, but then I got really into making comics in my mid 20s, and started doing it professionally not that long after, in the grand scheme of things. Uh, and I didn't really get into cannabis activism until I made a book, a comic nonfiction graphic novel called the Illegalization of Weed in America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that's the history of cannabis prohibition. Pretty basic. It's not pretty well told story, but
And
um,
you've done some
you know,
other nonfiction graphic novels too, right?
yeah. So I did my first book was a biography of the pro wrestler Andre the Giant,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I got really lucky, and that book ended up being like a New York Times bestseller, and just like a huge hit. Like nothing I haven't come close to a success that big since that book came out, but it allowed me to make a bunch of other um, a lot of books. I did one about Andy Kaufman. I did a book about Tetris. A lot of different stuff. I just illustrated a book about Vladimir Putin. Um, I didn't write that book, but I illustrated it. And I have a book about He-Man and 80s toys coming out in July.
It's really cool. Where can people find like the He-Man and the 80s toys? What made you want to do that? Because that's sort of a jump over, it feels like a little bit.
Yeah, I have a lot of like nostalgia for stuff from like the 80s in general. Um, and there's these documentaries and stuff that come out about 80s toys and TV properties, and they're just like see it as like such like a, oh, let's have this fun nostalgic romp through the 80s. Don't you love these old toys? And it's kind of a response to that, because like the nostalgia that all these people, my generation of adults have today was like implanted into their heads at age 4, 5, 6 and on by people that were just trying to like extract money out of them. So like to sit, I know we all love these things, right? We're
Mm.
all nostalgic for them, but like to sit back and then be like, well, um, that nostalgia was placed there like on purpose in a way, and like they're still reaping the benefits of it. And so like kind of like about how capitalism marketing towards children was something that we knew would cause, well, maybe we didn't know exactly how problematic it ended up being, but it would, we knew that children couldn't really tell the difference between the show and the ad.
Mm-hmm.
And basically we started in 1980, they deregulated um, children's media and just allowed companies to basically advertise to children via television 24/7, insofar as like the commercials were advertisements and the TV shows were also advertisements for toys. And like that was something that they didn't allow before that. And I feel like it created kind of like this kind of like insane like generation of people, myself included, um,
Mm-hmm.
that have like these emotional ties and to to fucking property, to media
Mm-hmm.
property. And like Disney owns like people's memories at this point. So it's just kind of like about that type of thing that goes on. I'm pretty excited about it because I had finished it a long time ago, and I got the release got delayed for a while, so it's finally coming out in July. So I'm excited about that.
Nice. I'm kind of sensing a theme here too, because you also have another comic strip that's a little bit more anti big business doing things that might not necessarily be good. Do you want to talk about Legalization Nation a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I didn't really, after I did that cannabis book, um, I started focusing in on cannabis a lot more, and also like the history of cannabis is so like we know that like people of color get arrested disproportionately more than white people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know that like there's this racial situation going on now, and I was like, oh, but like I was ignorant before I started doing research, like, oh, but like in the when they made it illegal, they did it because they truly believed that it was dangerous, and then it was just like the stereotype, and there's racism and whatever, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not like the primary thing. But truly, the reason for prohibition was racist. It has racist origins. Like
Mm-hmm.
the entire reason for the world's prohibition has racist origins, right?
Making up the
So,
word marijuana.
right, um, and so I started like taking this a lot more seriously, I think, and also like medical cannabis came to Pennsylvania like around that time, and like that was like the real eye opener to me. It was like going to the dispensary in Pennsylvania compared to like dispensaries I had been to in like Colorado, where there was like a million companies putting out all different types of products,
Mm-hmm.
compared to Pennsylvania, where there was like 5 companies, and it was just like different. I was like, what's the difference here? Like, what's going on? And just like the shittiness of the Pennsylvania medical cannabis market was what made me be like, why is it like this? Like, why is this so shitty? Basically, and
Mm-hmm.
once you start digging in there, it's just like an endless supply of reasons for why it's shitty. Um, and so I was just like constantly obsessing over this stuff and like trying to talk about it on Twitter a little bit, but like, you know, people don't really read tweets or take them seriously sometimes. And I had
Mhm.
this skill as like a cartoonist, and I was like, maybe if I put these grievances in comic form, people will read them. And so I started this comic strip called Legalization Nation that's just like about all these shitty things going on in cannabis legalization. Every once in a while, there's some good stuff, but for the most part, it's like pointing out the reasons why. Because I also don't think that there's a cannabis media. That was part of it too. Is that there wasn't at the time. I think it's gotten slightly better, slightly, but really like the cannabis media isn't doesn't cover cannabis with a critical lens because
Definitely.
most of because most of cannabis media is sponsored by the companies that are doing the shitty stuff, and it's not it's something that I think because of stigma never gets taken seriously. There's very few mainstream news sites that cover cannabis in a serious manner. And meanwhile, like because of that, because no one's taking this seriously, there are tons of shenanigans going on. Like these people are getting away with murder. No one's taking this seriously.
Literal murder
And,
too in some cases.
yeah, in some cases, right? Anyway, so it got me fired up, and I was like, I'm gonna make a comic strip about this, and I've been doing it now actually for like 2 years, and it's great. I love making comic strips. I hadn't done like a strip in like 10 years before I started doing this one. And I love it, and it's actually been syndicated to like a few different outlets, and it like dreamstate.com runs it every week, and Tucson Weekly runs it in print.
And I mean, it's a great comic strip for any of my listeners that don't already view it. And I know that there are a lot of friends and listeners who do. I think that, like you're talking about, just making it a little bit more consumable. I think that people just don't understand that these companies are doing this. And
Mm.
you do such a good job of breaking down these things in very consumable. This is long story short, this is what happened. Like, how do you decide on what you're going to focus on? Or is it just like you hear something on the news and you're like, oh, of course, yep, that goes in the queue?
Um, Sometimes it's like sometimes people contact me. Sometimes like it's just stuff that I'm following that I'm interested in, and and definitely some days like I don't even know what I'm gonna do at all, and I'm just like come up with something in the shower and be like, oh yeah, that's shitty too. I have been meaning to talk about that. People send me stuff a lot, like a lot of this union busting stuff that's been going on.
Hmm.
That employees. I will say that employees of MSOs are very disloyal to their companies and constantly send me incriminating shit that I can't really use because it's like anonymous. But
Hmm.
I do see it all. I mean, like photographs of grows that are just like disgusting looking, and just I've talked to like a lot of like people that work in corporate grows and all kinds of stuff, and hear all kinds of like bad practices.
See, what I need is for you to do like a Kitchen Nightmares, but in MSOs. Just go in there with a
Yeah,
film crew.
yeah, I know. I mean, that does need to get done. I mean, and you know what the thing is that makes me like the most annoyed with the whole thing is that we live in a country that very much praises um, competition, the free market. Let the invisible hand of the free market. Let's let the free market decide, etc. And then,
Competition in air quotes.
right, yeah, and then it comes to cannabis, and it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna by law make this only 5 companies. Like, it's just like it's so antithetical to every the bullshit that people talk about in every other business all the time. I think it's like we're in a unique position to watch corruption happen like to a brand new market so quickly. Like
Absolutely, in development.
yeah, like we don't get to see that often.
Will you walk with me? Would you talk with me? Would you open up your heart to me and show me all the love you found? Would you let me hold your precious heart of gold? Let me walk with you as this life unfolds. Don't be surprised if my feet don't touch the ground. For as sure as the world is turning, somewhere poor hearts are yearning. It's such a lonely life, always dissatisfied. The sleepless nights are pouring rain, I could never complain. For I'm in heaven when I'm by your side. I know I want to walk with you, God, I'd love to talk with you. I want to open up my little heart to you and show you all the reasons that it bleeds. Oh, I want to lose my shame, I want to feel the pain that comes from letting go until only love remains. And that's all you'll see anytime you look at me. For as sure as the world is turning, somewhere poor hearts are yearning. Such a lonely life, always dissatisfied. The sleepless nights are pouring rain, I could never complain. For I'm in heaven when I'm by your side.
Well, what I also like about what you're doing though is you're not just putting out content with the comic strips and stuff, but you also have your MSO maps on your website. Do you want to talk about those? Because they're such a great resource.
Yeah, so like MSOs, right? Like they're not good at developing consumer loyalty because they come into a city or a state, I mean, and when they first open up, their prices are out of control, expensive. Eventually, they start coming down, and the quality is not good. So like people are like Curaleaf, like that sucks, or like True Leave, like you hear about all these shitty things they're doing, whatever.
Hmm.
So what they do often is just keep making up a new brand and pushing them as like a new thing, so you don't associate it with the shittiness of their parent company. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so there's like a million brands, right? And not only that, there's tons of mergers and acquisitions happening all the time. So like some company that once was like a PA or whatever, your local state only company, then gets bought out by, you know, Truly or Curaleaf or, you know, any number of all these other ones. And then suddenly, but they don't, you know, nobody knows a thing. Sometimes they don't always change the logos and layouts and stuff. And then suddenly you think you're buying local, but you're actually not buying local.
Mm-hmm.
So it's confusing, and I think it's, you know, purposefully confusing. I made these. I had seen like a meme online that was like all the different grocery store brands and how there's only actually like 6 companies that own all the entire grocery store basically. And I was like, I should make that for weed. And so that's where the MSO map came from. So it's like something you can look at and see. This is the parent company. These are all its brands and companies that it owns and all these other things. And I haven't updated them in a long time, and they're probably horribly out of date right now because these you know, these mergers and acquisitions happen so often and so fast, and they come out with new brands so often and so fast as well.
Oh yeah. When I worked at a licensed dispensary in Illinois, it was so hard to keep consistent products on the shelf for medical patients. As soon as they went through one SKU, it was like, oh, now they've kind of caught on to what this is. Let's swap another product in.
Yeah. Let's change it out. So you're like, oh, well, that other one kind of sucked. Let's try this one, and it's like the same thing with different names. And in the news, the thing that's happening a lot right now in PA is that there's brands will get big on the West Coast and in California, let's say. And in California, it is a competitive market. So like for you to be a successful brand in California, you actually have to put out really good weed, like at good prices and like everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to like really take it seriously. But once your brand is big, you can just sell that brand to license it to an MSO for the MSO to put it out in MSO only state that you can't get into. So Cookies does this. You know, if you ever see Cookies in an MSO state, like they have it in PA, they have it in New Jersey, it's because they're licensed out to an MSO. And you know, celebrity brands, Tyson is everywhere. Like Tyson is just licensed out to in every state, I think. And you know, Ric Flair, and you know, even like Ricky Williams, right? He like won the Heisman Trophy, so he has this brand called Heisman.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to them. I talked to them a lot for one day, and they like sat there and listened to me and stuff, and they took their time to find local farms in Oregon, put out this really good weed, and avoided MSOs all over the West Coast and all these competitive states. But in Pennsylvania, they teamed up with an MSO instead of. I think that like that's they'll say like, oh, well, there's nothing we could do. That's the only way we could get in. But you know what? I think that's just then what I think that would have been better for the community and for if you don't want to work with MSOs and then you just like get rid of your principles immediately if like you can do it with an MSO in a state where you're not in. I think that Ricky Williams coming out and saying, I'm not going to come to Pennsylvania until there's room for small business. Or Wiz Khalifa, instead of signing a huge deal to Trulieve to be in all these states, be like, hey, I am not going to come into this state until it's fair. You know, I think that like people making that kind of spin would be so much bigger and better, and they can afford to do it because what are we talking about here? Pennsylvania, you're in like 5, 6, 7 other states that have way bigger sales in the PA medical market. You really have to sell yourself out just to be in this little tiny state.
Absolutely. If you're not going to do it right, just choose not to do it at all in that state. You already have a market.
Make a say something. If you are going out of your way to avoid MSOs in California, why is it okay to do it in Pennsylvania?
Do you think that is, and this is just like you for your opinion, do you think that's because of like the perception in California and Colorado and maybe on the West Coast is different of working with these brands, or do you think it's just
I think
the
so.
ability?
I do think that there is I feel like there's a people that know the California market and live in California have difficulty understanding how much trouble these companies are causing in MSO only states, because they're jack shit in California. Curaleaf's pulled out of California, and none of these companies are competitive at all. They're just like little nothing there. But meanwhile, behind all these people's backs in every other state, they're creating chaos, which is gonna end up causing chaos for these California companies sooner or later. Especially when federal legalization comes around. They're gonna have to face up against these people and see what it's really like. And I think it's there's this old comic from back in the day that was Saul Steinberg's New Yorker cover that is called like The View from Fifth Avenue.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? And it's it's supposed to be about the view as a New Yorker on the rest of the country. Seeing the rest of the country as these flyover states not really worth your time or attention. I think that's kind of what's going on in California, re the cannabis market in the rest of the country, because California's market is so mature, but they are facing a lot of the same issues that we are in other ways, like local banning. Even in California, there's like 30% of the states, the cities that allow cannabis businesses. It's really competitive there. They have really high taxes.
The path to market for small farms is so difficult.
Yeah, it's really hard. And it's a crazy market. It's different. It has different problems than the rest of the country. But it has big problems too. But I think that they also, there's an attitude sometimes that can downplay the problem with MSOs by saying things like, oh, it doesn't matter because quality will eventually win. That's what happens always. And that's not always true. I mean, look at beer. For a really long time, quality was not king at all. It was like the shittiest piss beer all across the country, and that's all you could get for a long time. And,
Absolutely.
And I don't think that that's what people want to see happen with cannabis. And if we don't take these threats that are going on now seriously, we are going to end up with that just like middle of the road, industrial cannabis that's going to take over the whole country.
Oh yeah, middle of the road if we're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. And the push by these companies to end home grow is not going away. In fact, they're actually achieving successes. Whereas if you see in places like New Jersey and Delaware, they legalize adult use cannabis without home grow. They're trying to do that everywhere, and it's going to be successful in places. So, there's some serious shit going on.
Oh yeah. And I wanted to pick your brain about, I know that there's been movement in California and a couple of other states talking about how the state is going to start allowing interstate commerce and just not worry as much about sending out of state if it's a licensed business. Have you heard anything about that, or did you want to discuss that at all? Because I sort
I
of
mean,
find it interesting with
I mean, I
developing.
think that would be amazing, and you know, I could maybe see it happening. Like I could see like Washington, Oregon, California, and you know, Nevada maybe all doing some sort of pact, but you'd still be breaking federal law. I think it's more likely that we will see, if not full legalization, some sort of piecemeal legislation that would change federal law in terms of bringing it over the border. But you never know. I mean, it's how it goes. But, I mean, they've been trying to do this. Like Oregon's been trying to do interstate commerce for many years now, and it really like it all comes down to federal legalization, federal law when you're bringing stuff over the border of states. So I don't know. I mean, the wheels of federal legalization are in motion. You know, but again, could be stalled or halted at any time.
What do you think about the push in Maine that's going on, talking about regulating as a food rather than as a drug?
I think it's great, and it sounds like super radical to people, but the thing is that Maine has such a great medical system that this actually wouldn't change all that much in Maine. Now, if it happened in a lot of other places, it would be like totally revolutionary. And the language and the way they talk about it is revolutionary. Don't get me wrong. But in terms of what it would change for the day-to-day life of people in Maine, it's almost nothing. Because in Maine, you can grow, there's a plant limit on what you can grow, but there's nobody going around checking it really. The law wouldn't allow for you to grow for sale. So whatever you're growing would be for personal use. So sure, you could grow 100 plants for yourself if you want to. But also, like, if you wanted to grow 100 plants and sell it, that's actually pretty easy to do in Maine as a caregiver, because you could get a caregiver license for probably not for 100 plants, but for a much larger grow, and then sell it at medical dispensaries pretty easily. That's what makes the medical market in Maine amazing. That and the and how you can come in with an out-of-state card and use it there because they have reciprocity. So like, if that happened in Maine, on paper it would change a lot. In practice, wouldn't change hardly anything. Maybe there'd probably be a lot of people growing more than 6 plants. There probably already are. If you want to grow 10 plants and the plant count 6, like, I think if I was doing it, I would not even bat an eye about there being an extra plant there. I couldn't imagine, getting in trouble for that. You don't really see anybody getting a fine or a ticket for having 7 plants instead of 6. Like, that's not really happening. But if this happened in New Jersey, that would be huge. Like, they don't have any home grow at all there. And this would allow them to have as much home grow as they want. And, it really like legalizes things on paper that are kind of already happening / unenforceable. Like, basically like a growers collective type thing. Like, somebody wants to grow for their friends also, not just for themselves, because they want to grow more weed than they could possibly smoke. And they give it away to their friends, but their friends like give them money because they're spending money on the grow and everything. Kind of like a de facto grow collective, which is technically not legal, but legal enough that it could happen totally without really much risk.
And do you think it might?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, do you think it might just change perception too? Just the whole
Yeah, no,
idea
I
of
think
it's more of
I
a
think
food.
that's the I think that's the big would be the big thing about that law, is that it's really putting it where it should be with agricultural products instead of with I don't know, potato chips or something like that,
Manufactured goods.
Yeah, or like candy, or even cigarettes, like, and the whole thing with the hemp laws too, like it just allows so much leeway for the hemp companies to kind of like pull a million kind of synthetic end arounds and ship all over the country. And I mean, like, what we really should do, which would circumvent the entire federal legalization thing, is just start calling all cannabis hemp. I mean, honestly, like, they've legalized every single morsel bit of the cannabis product except this one thing, THC. And so that just paves the way for so much fake shit and bullshit. And like, it's just honestly a dangerous stuff, and stuff that would make, if there was some sort of problem, would make everyone look bad. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah,
like
and things that if you had pot, you probably wouldn't go to anyways.
Yes, exactly. Like, nobody would go and try like a bunch of THC zero pills or something. You know, I mean, that's like a few steps away from like Spice, or those old fake cannabis products they would sell.
Gas station things.
K2, yeah.
And I know you said that. Go ahead.
There's just like there's the hemp, stores all over. They call themselves dispensaries. Like, this is creating actually a confusing thing for everyone, which really is a problem in a way. If you want teenagers not to get psychoactive products, the way to do that is not to just have these hemp stores selling synthetic cannabinoids like crazy. It's to legalize regular cannabis and have the regular safe thing that's been time tested for thousands and thousands of years available. The hemp market would dry right up.
Well, and there's a danger too of people trying to get into cannabis through hemp, but you very quickly hit a ceiling, right, on what you can actually just feasibly do. Right,
but also, like, the cost of starting a cannabis business are so high. Like, a lot of there's a proven track record of starting a hemp business in order to raise funds to be able to enter the cannabis world, because it's so expensive.
Oh yeah, the amount of white labeling.
Yeah.
And I know you said you had to get up early, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but did you want to talk about anything, or about your comic strips, or like get the word out about anything before I let you go?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to once again mention my book, He-Man. I always forget the subtitle. Let me make sure I got it right, because I'm really excited about the book, and I want to get it out as much as possible. It's called The He-Man Effect: How Toy Makers Sold You Your Childhood. It comes out 7/11/23, so in a month and a half, basically. And just read my comic strip at Legalization Nation. A new one came out today. It runs on my social media, on my Box Brown Twitter and Box Brown Instagram, and check out the Legalization Nation Patreon as well.
And do you have a website?
Yeah, actually, if you go to boxbrown.com, you can find those MSO maps to check those out. So,
Brian, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
thank you for having me. Let
Also,
me know when
keep
this
up.
goes live. I will post about it.
Absolutely. And also, please keep up the work with like Legalization Nation. Like, all I do is full-time cannabis stuff, and like, I appreciate it more than I think you realize, and a lot of people do. Like, you're talking about it not being in media. It's so refreshing to have something like that where it's like, yes, someone said something.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to today's episode, and thank you again for stopping by. The Bluegrass Podcast. Old fashioned, all natural, Kentucky bluegrass.